me, my name is Anne Walsh. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Information Studies just next door at University College London. I was delighted to be asked along here to chair a panel on the really important topic of discovery. Libraries and archives have always been about discovery, first of all with a small d and more recently with a capital D with the incoming of the web. And it's been an absolute delight to put this panel together. And I'm happy to introduce to you today, I'm just looking at my notes to see what order they're going in, Claudia Mendias from SOAS, who has an amazing background working in a wide range of IT projects, which she has always brought home on time and under budget, which not many people of our generation can say. so that in itself is impressive. And she's incredibly keen that all of the resources within the walls of SOAS should at some point be available and accessible to everyone, which is quite some mission when you think of the wide range of materials that they have available there. Then after Claudia speaks, Christopher Hilton is going to speak. He is currently the head of Library and Archives at the Britten-Pears Foundation, but has a long background not just in archives but also in digitisation. And then following him, Geoff Browell, who's the head of Archives Services at King's College London, and will be known to many of you in the room because of his really prolific involvement with AIM25, which is the organisation that provides a lot of continuing professional development for archivists and record managers within London. And he said, when I asked them for a biography, he said, the main thing people need to know about me is I have a tendency to get involved in far too many projects for my own good. So I think we have to be nice to him so that he doesn't then consider History Day to be one of those too many projects. So I've got a few slides. I'm not going to speak for long, for obvious reasons. I also have some lovely lollipops that my friend from the Royal Astronomical Society gave me. So I'm not being unprofessional, I'm just trying not to lose my voice. So as I say, we have a long history, as you guys know, in libraries and archives for discovery. And we've gone from an age of discovery where people would randomly, it seems, find things on the shelves, through an age of information retrieval where people would come in and seek purposefully for things, into a new age of discovery, by which we mean web-scale discovery. And the slide I have here is Ranganathan, S.R. Ranganathan, who came out with the 5 laws of library science originally in the 1930s. And I've chosen these words to start with because I really want all of you historians to be aware that however bad your day in the library or the archive is, we are trying our best to put you at the heart of everything that we do. These are the laws by which every librarian, archivist and other heritage professional works, and we are trying our best to put you really in the core of what we're doing. Can you click me forward a slide? Need to go back. Need to go back then. There we are, perfect. Okay, so by web-scale discovery, I think if there's one thing that when I started out doing my own research as a researcher that I would have wanted to know, or that I suppose I did know from my library background, that I've discovered that most other historians and literary researchers don't tend to realise is that the majority of data that you see when you search a catalogue isn't produced in the library, or even to library or archival standards. And what this image is showing you is, at the top in red, because we're important, so we're in red, is a few tiny 3 things that are produced in-house. And all of the rest of that circle comes into us from the outside world. So it's no longer the case that everything that you see that we put out to you is provided by us. And as a result, there are sometimes going to be things that are a little bit inconsistent and a little bit difficult to find. But worry not, because if we click forward again, there will always be a librarian or an archivist somewhere who will be able to help you to find what you're looking for. Okay, then the main message that I want to give to you is the final law of library science. When we talk about the library as a growing organism, Nothing that's just a building or just some books or just some bits of paper has a life of their own. It's your task as history researchers to breathe life into those materials, and to breathe life into our organism. So never ever be frightened to ask a question or worried about not being able to find something, because we'll always be there to help. And after that little bit of encouragement, I'd like to pass over to Christian. Do we need to shuffle some slides? Have you got slides? Sorry, it's Claudia. We'll pass over to Claudia. Do we need to shuffle the slides? And Claudia is going to talk a little bit about discovery, exemplifying from her current work at SOAS. We have a lot of IT professionals here, so you can see how smooth the IT changeover is going to be. Can you reduce mine down and go to the desktop? There you are. Perfect.
Thank you to Anne for inviting me to speak. Different from other panelists, I'm not a librarian, I'm not an archivist, I'm a technician, so I'm an information scientist. Although I've been working in the library for the past 4 years, and I'm quite versed in the challenges of getting the resources to share with you. I put the topic that we are supposed to think about, why one search is not always the best option. So we're trying to think through that. Why is one not the best thing, being that most people want a single search? Google seems to want it, Amazon seems to want it, most music providers want it, but one search is not always the best option. As a background, SOAS has a wide range.
I'm sorry, I don't think our microphone is working.
We only have to lean right into it, so it's almost touching the lips.
Okay. And the collections at SOAS are the print media, the institutional repository, so publications, the electronic media, archives and special collections. We have a set of standalone databases also, Swahili manuscripts, Islamic manuscripts, and the list goes on. There's a range. Each of those historically have been placed, because of the different type of data, in different data sets. So we have the archives and special collections in one set, research output in another one, the catalogue, the print media in another one, our electronic resources, and our digital collection. So we have 4 silos. There is no one search. You have to search at least 5 times to find what you're after. The key thing with that is, how do you know what you're after if you don't know? So how do you know what you don't know? And the librarian might ask, well, who are you? What are the questions you're after? But you don't know, because you don't know what's there. Okay, so because of that first question that was dependent on having these 5 silos, we started thinking, well, how can we make that one search? Okay, so we have our 5 silos. You go to the library and they ask you, who are you? Are you undergraduate? Are you postgraduate? Are you a historian? Because depending on who you were, you would get placed down one path. One of the things that I started thinking about is how do we think of people? How do we get at that? Who are you? We know from research that the way people research things goes through phases. And there is the initiation phase where you're kind of searching. It's very motive, you're very excited about the topic you're learning, and then it goes into an acquisition phase where you're kind of gathering information, sometimes emotive, sometimes not, sometimes distractive. Down a rabbit hole you might go. Then you formulate your argument, and then you start getting your actions very controlled and very specific. Then you know who you are, you know where you're after. So there are different types of you, depending on the stage of the research you're in. Again, how would you approach the library depending on your stage? And those are the questions that keep on coming to me, so we tried our best at SOAS and made what I call my purple umbrella. The 5 data sets now are under one search, for better or worse. You search for art, you find our researchers' latest publication in art, the latest book on art, anything that we digitize, anything in the archive that comes across as art. Yeah? So you don't need to know who you are, you don't need to know what stage you're in. We will present as much as we can. That might have challenges for you. Going back to the who are you, let's assume that we are an Asian art and anthropology student, year 1. Go in and type in Asian art. I do hope that this resolves well, but that is the search that would come up. And you have a book, you have some digitized material. One of the key things that I'd like to point to you is that we have the library, digital collection, your resources, and your archive. And there's most of the things in the print collection, but there's also 6 items in the archive. If you're a year 1 student, you might not know what an archive is. You might not, right? Thinking through. Actually, some research tells us that they don't. So if you have that archive, maybe at this point you go and click on it. Maybe. And you find that we have the archive from a researcher. So Professor Eugene Jane Henderson did some research on linguistics. So if you're an art anthropology student, you're not that interested, but it's in the same area you're interested. It's not the same discipline, but now you're learning what an archive is at the early stage of your career. You go through 3rd year, and then you might actually click on the research online and find that a publication, and you find your thesis supervisor is writing something on the similar thing. You find yourself engaged with that material even more widely. So just by presenting the options, the who you are, things, we start guiding you to which road you should take, which avenue, which material type you should investigate. Yeah, just opening up the library to you. So you research online. Sorry, I forgot to click those. Just to end up, yes, there was a theme in my talk. So which road to take becomes your option, because at SOAS Library anyway, we're providing you across the material type the options. So you don't need to know who you are, but you can figure out where to go to from there. Okay? I think that was clear enough.
Wonderful, thank you so much. They're both working, I don't know why Richard can switch them over like that, but anyway. Yes, so that was marvellous. So we've heard about how you can try and do one search if your organisation allows you. Now we're going to turn to Christopher, who's going to talk a little bit from a sort of archives and digitisation perspective.
Is this actually working? I don't think it is.
Okay. My apologies, I'm perched behind that screen, so I'm going to stand up, I think. number one, if I drop the microphone at all and my voice stops booming out across the room, do sort of shriek at me or something. Number two, can you see the screen okay, those of you who are on that side of the room? Great. Okay, I'm going to talk about the same sort of things that Claudia was talking about. I'm also getting rather distracted by the fact that I can hear my own voice half a second later, so this is a truly rock and roll experience. Once again, I'm going to be looking at single search and, as you see, pros, cons and dodging the issue. Although I'm now head of the archive at the Britten-Pears Foundation, I spent 24 years just up the road with the Wellcome Library, and so a lot of my experience and the examples I'm going to be drawing on come from there. But I think they're applicable to pretty much any institution that's got different formats of material. You as researchers are going to arrive at an institution, and quite rightly, you're not necessarily going to care whether you're looking for archive material or book material or artworks or sound files or whatever. You don't want to look at lots of different databases, lots of different silos. You want to just find the stuff that's relevant for your research. And this is what we're trying to do as information professionals, though there are some bumps in the road which I'm unfortunately going to set out to you. But basically, you and the entire rest of the world is trained to expect something like that when you go searching. What you want is a single search box, and that's what our users are expecting. That's what we as information professionals have to try and deliver. That's my previous employer's website, the Wellcome Library front page. It has a single search box search there, and speaking as an insider, I know there are a lot of difficulties with that and with the results you get from that. But nonetheless, Google Analytics taught us that we had a tab saying search the library catalogue. You could click on that and you get to a simple search there. And some people used it. And then there's also a little link you can probably see on that left-hand slide saying advanced search. And if you clicked on that, you got to this screen here, which allowed you to combine various different searches in detail, in different fields, and construct Boolean arguments about this here and not that there, and nobody used it. Google Analytics was absolutely scathing on that. Nobody ever went there. So ultimately, single search box it is. That's what we need to deliver. There is a caveat, which is, I think we assume that if you search in Google and if you search in the library catalogue, you're doing the same thing. And in fact, you're not. Somebody once explained to me that the raison d'etre of a Google search is to give you one search that is good enough to get you off Google. And from that point on, you can start surfing sideways. And there's a lot of redundancy in a Google search. You end up getting to the same thing in different routes. I mean, if you put in Chris Hilton archivist egotistically into Google, you end up with a lot of duplication, and it's the same bloke. You know, you can actually click on these and say, yeah, it's all him. Whereas if you're looking in a library catalogue, you do want to check everything on there. You want to be sure that you've got everything that is relevant, and possibly check out them all. So there are some slight differences in what you're doing, but I just chuck that in to mess with your head, really. The challenges of delivering a single search are, there are different standards for different stuff. For good professional reasons, we record different types of information about the different things that we might be describing. Book catalogues, for example. This is a MARC catalogue entry. Books are pretty standard in the types of information they present. They've got titles, they've got authors, they've got publishers, they've got publication dates, they've got publication places. MARC breaks these things up into a very, very granular record. Lots and lots of different little fields. Even then, there are different ways in which you can use MARC. Little side issue, do artworks have titles? Now, what we've got here, this one here, is a painting by Charles de Muth from the 1920s, who spent his career in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, painting concrete grain silos. That's called My Egypt. And there, the title clearly is relevant. It's not just a painting of a grain silo, he's making a statement about it. This ex-voto here is simply described in the Welcome Catalogue as man who's been hit by a falling flower pot. And that doesn't have a title, it simply has a description. And some places might put the information man hit by a falling flower pot in the title field, some might put it somewhere else because it's not actually a title provided by the painter. So there are some difficulties in crunching different things together across different data sets. Archives typically are much more slimline, unlike books. They have quite a slim range of things that we can say about them. They've got a reference, they've got a title, they've got a date, there's one or two other things that are compulsory, but a lot of the information is actually implicit. If you look at this hierarchy here, we've got here the annual reports of the Eugenics Society. Nothing in the catalogue entry there says that this is an annual report of the Eugenics Society. It's only the fact that it's within the archive of the Eugenics Society that gives you that information. So quite often the information is not there in word form, it's implied by its position within a hierarchy. So, if you've got a single search box summarising, it's great if you're searching for a particular word and that word is in the catalogue. I always remember about 10 years ago somebody came into the reading room at the Welcome Library and said, "What have you got on Marmite?" And the answer before we'd actually retroconverted our catalogues would have been, "I have not a clue." Not the remotest. Actually, it turns out, when we're in a position to say, well, stick Marmite into the search box and see what you come up with, the answer is we've got shed loads. We were actually the National Museum of Marmite, we just didn't know. But, as you will see, number one, you come up with a lot of hits on the word Marmite. What you don't find out is where they are. These are dotted around the archives in the papers of different nutritionists, but it doesn't tell you, what have I found? Where have I come in? What archives are these within? You have to infer that from the reference or click into it and start navigating a hierarchy. Number two, if there's stuff on Marmite but the file is called vitamin B rich spreads or something like that, if the word Marmite is not there, then you're not going to find it with a single search box. And similarly, it's not really very good at answering the more basic questions that Claudia was talking about. When you turn up and say, well, what sort of stuff have you got here? Simply serving up a white box and asking people to guess what the magic word is not very helpful. In fact, it's rather passive-aggressive. It just sort of sits there and asks you to guess the right word. And sometimes it's like watching a marriage gone horribly wrong, watching a reader interact with it. You must have something on TB. No, it's not that. Well, how about consumption then? No, not that. Well, it's all there. You just should have put tuberculosis in. All you have to do with us nicely. So one of the things I'm quite obsessional about is breaking away from the search box. It's a great and powerful tool for finding words within metadata, but that's not the only game in town. And a couple of years ago at Welcome, there was an experiment which we called Alpha. It wasn't even a beta product, which was an attempt to imagine a library without a search box. And what it did was generate data generate information from the data that was already in the catalogue. There was no curating of the data, it was all stuff that was already there. But it surfaced, for example, names of people who had been in the author boxes of titles, and formats and subjects and so forth. And it generated a list of what the most common things in those fields were. So if somebody wanted to know, well, what's the helicopter view of this collection? What's the commonest thing in it? You could go to this page, see that laid out, and then click on them and start seeing what things have been catalogued under those headings. Moving a bit further on from that, you can actually start employing visual tools as well. So, here we've got a combination of the things that have got cookery in the subject file and subject field and the date of publication. So you can actually see, well, where are you strong in this particular thing? If I'm interested in cooking in the 18th century, do you have stuff that's relevant? And you can see it instantly rather than by doing some huge search and then working through the hit list. And actually we learned some things about our collection that we didn't know before. So, single search box, in summary, great. There are problems, it's not the only game in town, and we are actively exploring ways of coming round its deficiencies and trying to deliver something better for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was super. Now, last but not least, not last but not third, we've got Geoff. Sorry, I'm really not well. You can tell I'm not well. I'm not faking this throat. So we've got Geoff, who's now going to give another perspective. Have you got slides? No? Do you want to reduce the picture so you don't look like you're Christopher in any photos? You still look like you're Chris, but never mind. This is actually Geoff, not Chris. Isn't getting rid of Chris. There we are. Marvellous.
Thanks a lot. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Good. That's right. I'm waking people up. You must be sleeping. Thank you, Chris, for that lively talk. I guess you could say that Discovery is a Marmite activity after that, really. It's a nice segue in. Well, my job here is not, I haven't got a presentation, it's to throw out one or two provocative comments. That's what I'm paid to do, or not paid to do, as the case may be, about archives and how we use them and how we access them, and what Discovery is. So what do you mean by Discovery? Is clearly a key question. Do you mean discovery of stuff that we've catalogued and that we put away in a library and an archive and we've assigned some significance to it, or is it material that you are assigning significance? It might be a data set that's in private hands, it might be your own material. You're all archivists. You all have postcards at home and photographs and love letters and ticket stubs from theatre concerts and things. You have to manage all that material and you dispose most of it in your life. You will get rid of virtually everything that you've created, and thank goodness that you do. Unless you're a hoarder, then you'll end up on Channel 5. So as archivists, we probably get 1%, 5% of somebody's stuff when we take their papers in, or in institutions stuff, and that's the first thing that you need to understand. The first rule of archives, the first law, is that archivists, the main skill that an archivist has to have is knowing what to destroy, not what to keep, or what to allow to be destroyed. And that means that when you come to an archive collection, you're not getting a perfect representation of somebody's life or an organisation's activities. You're getting perhaps a snapshot in time. You're maybe getting a very biased view that somebody has destroyed material on the line. You often get that when people have been married several times, because Chris, you were bringing up the marriage metaphor there. If somebody has been married several times, you'll find that the next wife or husband destroys the love letters and so on belonging to the previous one. So you say, why is this gap in the record? Well, there was a bonfire one day. So as the job of archivist, that's another thing that you don't necessarily get on the catalogues. It's all that context. And that's why you need to come and speak to us, because we keep all that behind the scenes. It's all the secret stuff, and that's what we keep so that we can hold on to our jobs and not be mechanised and artificial intelligence come along and drones and things and do away with us. Well, we've got secret information that can keep our jobs. Don't tell people that. So that's the first law, really, knowing what to destroy. And the second one is that archives are about paper, they're about people, not about paper. And that could be paper or digital. I mean it in the broader sense. It's about people's lives and about their hopes and fears, and their dreams and their loves and their losses, and the totality of their lives. And our job is to help preserve that and select it and somehow celebrate and allow you as researchers to come along and do something meaningful with it and to reuse it. And I'm throwing out that point because in 2 days' time it's All Souls Day. I'm not going to talk about Halloween, I'm not American. It's All Souls Day on Thursday, and I think it's worth bearing in mind that we have a responsibility as custodians, and that's something as researchers you'll come to appreciate, or you have appreciated it if you currently do research in an archive. It's a much more controlled environment because we have very valuable things that we're seeking to preserve. So how do we find archive material? As Chris has shown you the type of layout that you can expect. There are various websites like AIM25 that I help run, also Discovery, the National Archives and the Archives Hub, where you can cross-search archive descriptions. But again, the thing to ask there, and the thing that we're here as archivists to do and help provide, is not to allow you to find what you want to find. It's so that you can discover things you never knew existed. And serendipity is probably the most important aspect. And you'll find that you'll learn far more from talking to an archivist or talking to the creator of a collection than you necessarily will by looking at the collection itself. Because archives are about people, not paper. So there are these various websites online, and something called the UK Archival Thesaurus that I also run, which is a subject term list that enables you to focus in on unusual names for the same things and synonyms and so on. So that you can, if you write your term into that Google white box and nothing comes up, don't worry, you can go on something like the UK Archival Thesaurus or where it's embedded in, and hopefully you can find alternative terms for things. And hundreds of archives nationally and internationally are available via these search websites. And an important point is that our data is accessible to Google, which means you can do a Google search and find what you want. That isn't necessarily true of all archives. Lots of stuff's still on paper. If it is digital, it's not necessarily online. It's not necessarily searchable by the search bots, which means that you might have to go to some of these sites to find what you're looking for. And we're expanding internationally. So an example is AIM25 is expanding into Africa. So we're starting off with one country, and we hope to have all the countries in Africa represented, so that people can cross-search the contents of all the archives, and that's a fiercely difficult thing to do. In practical terms, it's very difficult, not least because the first country that we've lighted upon has a major outbreak of plague. So that is a considerable challenge for the archivists, because they not only have to deal with damp and infestation and insects and readers who don't do as they're told, but also pneumonic plague, which is a bit of a bummer. But increasingly, resources worldwide are being linked up like this. But again, it's only a starting point. There's far more in the archive, there's far more uncatalogued than there is catalogued. There's also a vast quantity of digital material that's becoming available, but people have to sustain that and preserve it. Another controversial point, perhaps my final one before I hand over, is that in 50 years' time, a lot of the digital content that we have that's perhaps not on Facebook or in a controlled environment like that will have gone and disappeared. It's no good people saying it will be preserved. It needs people who can appraise material and you can understand the context of material and what to keep and what not to keep. And there are only so many of us, and there are only so many people who are interested, and events will intervene and life will move on because all things pass. And that's another thing that archivists, that's my final controversial point, that we're dealing as archivists with death and with passing and the ephemeral. So I could talk on and on and on about paywalls and whether you can access stuff, because it's not necessarily just archive stuff that's behind walls here. It might be, as I said, digital material, it might be websites that are preserved, it might be oral histories, it could be personal things that you're adding to an archive. So you might take a collection in future as researchers and add to it, add metadata to it, add content to it, add your opinions, add your journal articles and all the rest of it. All becomes part of the whole. So it's not static. So Discovery will change in future, and hopefully we'll be here to help you navigate your way through it all. So I'll hand over now.
Yeah, so great instruction there to always remember it's about people and about talking to people. Not just about the objects, but I'm sure I don't have to remind you of that. As historians, you're all interested in people too. Okay, so without further ado, I shall pass over to Christian to help us figure out how to discover heritage collections at the British Library.
Thanks. Yes, my name's Christian Algar, and I've worked at the British Library for about 11 years now, so thoroughly institutionalised, and my contribution is going to be obviously through the prism of that institution. Just in case, I should say, it's very bright in here, and if I look like I'm cross or a bit peed off, it's just the bright lights. They make me frown a little, but it's apt because I'm hoping to shine some light on the collections and how you discover them, especially at the British Library. Now, Anne commenced drawing attention to non-governance laws, and the first, that books are to be used. It sounds like the blindingly obvious, but one of the points that I make is that people often miss the blindingly obvious. And this can be really true in the nascent stages of people's discovery and research process. Books are especially to be used when it comes to finding other books. And if we look back in time at past entry points to the British Museum, the precursor to the British Library, or when the British Library was still at the British Museum, we can see on this slide the entrance for readers, and the subjects are set out there. And in the bottom right-hand column you can see BBR, and that's where you'll find the printed catalogues. There are, of course, these are general printed catalogues of the whole collection. There are, of course, more specialist catalogues. The two main catalogues are based on those printed catalogues, and they're called Explore the British Library, and that's printed in everything else except for archives and manuscripts, for which there's another catalogue, confusingly called Explore Archives and Manuscripts, and of course they look very similar, and they can be quite confusing. The main catalogue, Explore the British Library, is a big beast. There's over 60 million items described on it, and it can be a much maligned creature. But I'm going to suggest that it's actually somewhat an underappreciated digital asset. It's one of the best that researchers have access to, and it's freely available online. There's all kinds of material on there, 60 million or so items. Now, when it comes to the material that I deal with, printed heritage, there are an estimated 4 million books printed before 1900, and these can get somewhat lost. It's true that it's actually quite difficult to find a particular record for something, even when you know what you're looking for. But it's actually great when people find things that they're not expecting. So if you're searching pre-restoration drama, it's actually nice to find an audio file of that play being acted out, so people serendipitously can find material that they never thought would be helpful for their research. Here's a list of some of the specialist early printed catalogues that we have, the fundamental one being the English short title catalogue, which lists printing in English or in former British colonies pre-1800. The British Museum, the British Library, has hundreds of special named collections, and these have been collections that have been formed historically by particular figures, and there are printed catalogues that will help you open these collections up and use them for your research. Now let's go back to the British Museum in Bloomsbury, because it's a nice place to go. And this is a picture of the old round reading room, which opened in 1857. And if you look at it and think what sticks out, it's all those impressive looking books in the galleries surrounding the people who are using that library. It actually looks like a living organism, doesn't it? It looks like something that's living and its heart is beating. There was a catalogue that described these materials, a catalogue of books placed in the galleries in the reading room of the British Museum, published in 1886, and I think it's worth meditating on the significance and impact of these books that held on those shelves. All the use that's been made of them over the years by past researchers and scholars. Now, what else sticks out? The big windows, the light pouring in from them. The collections there could only be used in natural daylight, because before pre-electric, there weren't safe light solutions. There's too much risk of fire. But what I want to do, like these bright lights that are making me frown, is shine some light on these printed books. I've praised the online catalogue as an underappreciated digital tool, but I must confess that I'm a bit of a pain in the ass proselytizer of printed reference sources. Evidence from our reading rooms show that the open access reference shelves, those galleries that we've just seen surrounding the reading room there, they're underused. And this might be because people don't really know about them, even though they are there in front of their eyes all the time they're sitting in the reading room. So on these shelves you've got things like printed subject indexes, And these can be incredibly useful when it comes to looking at early printed books, because early printed books often have early catalogue records, which are noteworthy for their brevity. So it means that to get more out of finding those collection items, you need to think about using other sources, other printed sources. So subject indexes, they've been helpfully assembled in the past by British librarians, and it's a great way to see how books have relationships to each other by subject. There are tons of bibliographies that are useful, and they collate books together in meaningful relations. Past scholars have created some real monuments of bibliography, and it's daft to ignore the produce, the real kind of products of past scholarship and research. Even if we think about plain old boring printed catalogues, I think there's quite a simple fact that it's often easier just to look down a printed page than it is to try and follow something on screen, online. If you're trying to follow, for example, the edition status of a popular work, it can get a bit messy and confusing when you're looking online. So more printed reference sources. These are really designed for people who are new to using libraries, and I should hope that some of you are familiar with some of these that are up on the screen. At the very top there, we've got quite what some people might think is a basic book, Walford's Guide to Reference Material. And this is a really good basic entry point to any kind of research. It might, as I said, look like the blindingly obvious, but it's actually easy to miss the seemingly obvious when you're immersed in research. So, digital resources, I think let's apply the same law. Digital resources are to be used. Of course, they and books are used to certain extents, but it's tempting to think, are people neglecting printed reference sources because digital resources are superior? Have they made printed books, printed reference redundant? I don't think so. And it's interesting to think that evidence actually shows that people tend not to use electronic resources or finding aids to the maximum benefit either. For example, if you're using something like a searchable newspaper database, simply by using proximity operators, you'll make a much more powerful search than just putting in the one simple search that we've all been talking about. Something like the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography has a full text searchable facility. And we know for a fact that people who even at PhD level don't realise that some of these resources have those functions. So once again with the printed references, these are some electronic resources that hopefully you should be familiar with. And there's a great variety of them that we have at the British Library. Mostly only accessible on site in the library's reading rooms. A small handful are now being offered to registered readers online. But we've got a range, so there's ways of accessing these electronic resources as access to facsimiles of primary sources, and I think there's meant to be some theme of magic and witchcraft this day, so I've taken an illustration from Reginald Scott's book here, The Discovery of Witchcraft, one that amuses me quite good. I don't know if you can see it very well, but Scott exposed the kind of, the myths and trickery of magic and so-called witchcraft. And there's a nice illustration there of a decollation of John the Baptist, a guy with his body laid out in his head while he's craftily concealed under the table. Some more useful electronic resources here. Here's a screenshot from the Bibliography of British and Irish History. This is a good way of seeing the latest, some people here who work there. This is a good way of seeing the most recent published research that's available. But I said I'm a proselytizer of print, and I'm going to reiterate it. It's essential when you're undertaking your research to make use of all the available printed reference sources that there are. But please don't try and carry this many away from the shelves, because librarians tend to frown on that. So when we're talking about, we're thinking about discovery, I feel also must draw attention, and it's been drawn by the previous speakers. We have to draw attention to the hidden resources that are people, and that's the staff at the libraries, curators, for instance, and here's a list of library experts in my department that are on the website. So we have talk to staff at the libraries, whether it's a large library, large collection, or a small collection. It's the staff who know the collections, and we have a dedicated reference service who they are the first point of access to you trying to work out how our particular library's collections are going to help you. And there are multiple access points now. You can email them, you can talk to them face to face in the reading room, you can have a quick chat with them on the, through an access point on the online catalogue, and you can even talk to them on social media. Humans are a great resource. Their accumulated knowledge and experiences handed down through staff, through the generations, and staff also learn from people using the collections. And then we can then in turn help other people who are doing similar research. So I'm going to finish with an emphasis on people as a resource, not just staff, but readers. It's readers, users, researchers, everyone everywhere, or anyone anywhere, whichever term you prefer. It's libraries and collections are about their participation. I'm just going to plug a new project that we've got at the British Library launching later this week. And this is a crowdsourcing project with our historic playbills collection, which are kind of, one of the archetypal hidden collections. They're uncatalogued, tens of thousands of single sheets, and we're hoping to harness people power to mark and transcribe key components on these playbills, the titles, genres, dates, the names of people involved in them. There's a wealth of social history besides just drama history, theatre history in these playbills. And this is a way for us to expose them to more and wider audiences. I'm just going to finish here with this slide of a volume containing some of those playbills, and you can see how fragile they are. And we have to be careful about how many people we have looking through these, because they won't last for very long if everyone gets some time with them. So always look for new types of things that you can pursue your research with. But I do want to finish with one slight warning, and that's look for something that no one has done before. If it's daft to neglect the work of past scholars and bibliographers and not make most use of available reference sources, it's even dafter to replicate something that's already been done and could end in tears. Thanks.